Back in Power BI, and in today's video we're going to show you how to use the Networkdays function in Dax to calculate the total number of working days. We're going to import some data, then we're going to take a look at the total number of days in your date calendar, and then we're going to calculate out. It's a very simple function. It's called Networkdays. We're going to show you how to use this to calculate the number of working days. If you're working with sales data and you want to eliminate either weekends or days that the store may not be open, total working days could be a solution to work with Networkdays in Dax. Let's go to Power BI. Back in Power BI, in today's video, we are going to show you how to use Networkdays to calculate the number of days that a store could potentially be open if you exclude weekends. The Networkdays function does allow you to determine which days, whether you want it to be Saturday and Sunday as weekends, Sunday and Monday, Monday and Tuesday. Let's work through how you would use the Networkdays to calculate the total number of days in a year. Now, the first thing we have, we're going to put a link to this file in the description below. It has two tables. It has a coffee sales table. It also has a date table. We recently did a video on how to make this date table. When you go to the table view, you will see from the date table that it contains the following columns. It has date, calendar year, month name, month number, and weekday. And the relationship is a date relationship between the date table and the transaction table. The first thing we are going to calculate is the number of days. This has every single day of 2023 in this table. So to create a new measure, we're going to call this total days, and it's going to be equal to a count rows, and we're just going to count the number of rows in the date table. So that is the syntax. Total days equals count rows from the date table. When you bring this into a visual, we have 365 days. The next measure we're going to make is the total number of working days. And the total number of working days is going to be calculated as a formula that we're going to calculate. And this formula is going to be calculated with a couple of variables. If we go to the date table and create a new measure, we're going to call this working days. And working days is going to be calculated as a variable, and we're going to have first date, which is going to be equal to the minimum of the date table, the date column. The next variable is going to be last date, and that's going to be equal to the max of the date table of the date column. So those are the two variables. Now, whenever you use a variable, you do have to use a return function. And the return function is going to be the network days. The network days is going to be calculated. And what network days asks for is the number of whole work days between two dates. And the two dates are our variables, first date and last date. So network days, the IntelliSense is asking for the start date, the end date, and then optional are the weekend and the holidays. We're going to show you those options next. But first off, we're going to work with the basic network days. And the start date is our variable, first date, and the end date is our variable last date. All we need to do now is close out the network days, and now you have a working days. So the working days is equal, if we bring in a new visual, we will bring in the work days as 260. Now it automatically defaults to Saturdays and Sundays as being non-working days, but you can change those, and we're going to show you how to change those. To verify that this is true, we can go back to the date table, and you see at the bottom we have 365 rows. If we were to filter out Saturdays and Sundays, that would leave us with 260 filtered rows, and that is the total number of working days Monday through Friday. Now again, you can change those, and we're going to show you how to change those on the syntax. So if you go back to the report view, we have 260 working days, 365 total days. If we want to calculate the sales per day, if we take the total number of days, so we're going to call this revenue per day, and the revenue per day is going to be the divide function, and we're going to divide the numerator and the denominator. Now the numerator is going to be, we have a total revenue, that is the numerator, and the denominator is going to be total days. If we close this out and bring in total revenue into a visual, based on 365 days, this store averages $1,910 revenue per day. If we create an additional measure that only calculates the working days, we're going to call it working day revenue, and we're going to calculate this as the divide function. The numerator is still going to be total revenue, but the denominator is going to be working days. This gives us, if you calculate the 100 days, 105 days that it wasn't open for the working days, and you bring in the working day revenue, now every day that the store is open is $2,690 of working day revenue. So that gives it a whole different perspective on how much revenue this store is making on days that it is open versus days in the year. When you look at the Networkdays documentation, it does allow you to put in the change in the weekdays and holidays. So here is the weekend function. You can omit Saturday or Sunday, that is the default, or you could type in a 1. You could have Mondays and Sundays be a weekend. So let's try the same formula with Sundays only. That is the 11. You see that 11, Sundays only? We're going to use that and then see how it changes our numbers on the working day revenue. If we recalculate the working days function, we can add in, if you notice the weekend now, by adding in that parenthesis, comma, we are going to bring in 12, and by hitting enter, our work days gets added into, because we took off the Sundays, so 313 working days. Now, our revenue per day is going to change to 2,230. It goes down because we were open an extra 50 days in the year. Again, we can change those work days. So that is how you calculate the number of working days. Remember, the working days, you have a variable of the first date, a variable of the last date. If we go back and change this 12 to the default, then we can get back to the answer, which will be 260 working days, and the working day revenue is 2,690. So this Networkdays function can come in valuable if stores are open only on Mondays and Tuesdays, or if a store is closed Fridays. Again, when you're using sales analysis, by calculating those working days, you can then nest them in additional measures as you are starting to work on your calculations of revenue, your revenue per day. We're going to put a link to this file in the description below, and we'll also put a link to where you can get that coffee sales data for some of our other videos. We recently did a video on how to calculate this date function. And this was, again, another couple of variables, and then what is called the add columns function. You can watch a video on that in the description below as well. So follow along as we continue to learn. That is a look at the Networkdays function using Dax in Power BI.